Welcome to the Japan Deep Dive Report. We're about to dive into one of Japanese history's most fascinating literary puzzles. We're on the hunt for a man named Kakinomoto no Hitomaro, a figure who is both a giant of literature and, somehow, a complete historical ghost. So here's the central mystery, the thing that makes this so compelling. I want you to imagine the Shakespeare of ancient Japan, a poet whose words have echoed for over 1,300 years, a man celebrated as a literary saint. Now, picture searching for him in the official histories of his time, the imperial records, the court documents, and finding absolutely nothing. Not a single mention. That's the paradox of Hitomaro. His poetry is immortal, but the man himself, he's completely vanished from the official record. How does that even happen?
So how do we solve a mystery like this one? Well, we follow the clues he left behind in his art. We're going to start with this whole problem of the poet who wasn't there. Then we'll uncover his role as an empress's divine voice. From there, we'll see how he became a true master of poetic grief, explore that blurry line between the man and the myth, and finally, discover how this historical ghost became revered as a saint of poetry.
Okay, let's start our investigation right here with this core contradiction. You've got this immense fame on one hand and a complete absence from the official archives on the other. So why? Was his rank just too low to ever get a mention? Or was there maybe some other reason he was overlooked? For now, all we know for sure is that he exists only where he chose to exist, inside his art.
So let's place this guy in time. We know Hitomaro was active in the late 7th and the very early 8th centuries. His career lines up perfectly with the reigns of two really powerful rulers, Empress Jito and Emperor Monmu. His earliest confirmed work we have is an elegy from around 689, and his last is from about 700. This is a very specific window of time, a really vibrant period of political change in Japan. And he was right there in the middle of it all, writing for the most powerful people in the entire country.
All right, so if he's not in the official histories, where in the world do we find him? The answer is this one single monumental book, the Manyoshu, which translates to the collection of 10,000 leaves. Now, I can't stress this enough. This book is everything. It's Japan's oldest poetry anthology, and for our purposes, it's our only primary source. Every poem, every little biographical hint, every single clue we have about who Hitomaro was comes from this one collection. Without the Manyoshu, he'd be completely lost to time. Okay, so our first big clue is hiding in plain sight, right in Hitomaro's public-facing work. See, he wasn't just writing pretty verses. He was crafting the official story of the empire. He was the powerful voice for a sovereign who claimed to be a living god on earth.
To really get what he was doing in his public poems, you have to understand this crucial ritual called kunimi. It literally means country viewing, and this was so much more than just admiring the scenery. When an emperor or empress went up a high mountain and looked out over the land, it was this hugely powerful political and religious statement. It was a performance of their divine connection to the land and a prayer for its prosperity. It was pure power projection.
And boom, here we see exactly how Hitomaro captured that performance in a poem for Empress Jito. He doesn't just say, hey, the view is nice. No, he immediately establishes her divinity, calling her a god incarnate. Then he takes it a step further. He claims that even the mountains and rivers draw near and serve her. This isn't just poetry, folks. This is brilliant political communication. It's framing the ruler as a deity whose power literally commands nature itself. But that grand, public voice, that was only one side of him. Now we're going to pivot. We're moving from the imperial propagandist to explore a much more intimate, and you could argue, much more powerful side of his genius, his role as the supreme master of the elegy. The specific kind of poem we're talking about is called a banka. It's a poetic lament for the dead. Lots of poets in the Manyoshu wrote them, but Hitomaro, he was just in a class of his own. He was seen as the absolute master of the form, composing these elegies that were longer, more complex, and more emotionally devastating than anyone else's. It seems like whenever the court needed to commemorate the passing of a royal, he was the guy they called.
And his talent here was something else. He wrote these incredibly profound elegies for the highest members of the imperial family, one of which is the single longest poem in the entire Manyoshu. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. Given his low status, he almost certainly never met these royals. He was tasked with channeling the most intimate, crushing grief for people he didn't even know. This ability to just feel for others, to give a perfect voice to their sorrow, that's the mark of a true genius.
So, this brings up a really important question.
With all this talent and with these huge important commissions, what exactly was Hitomaro's job? Let's dig into the evidence around his professional life.
So a crucial point here is just the sheer scale of his work. In the Manyoshu, we find 19 of his long poems. These are called choka, and they're the complex narrative works that really built his reputation for those epic elegies and all that imperial praise.
And that's not all. On top of those, we have 69 of his short poems, or tanka. So you add it all up, and his footprint on the foundational text of Japanese poetry is just enormous. He's one of its most significant contributors by volume alone.
So, the big question, was he a professional court poet? I mean, it seems like an obvious conclusion, right? But the scholarly consensus today is probably not. While he was clearly getting commissions from the court for these incredibly important poems, the general view is that this wasn't his official title or his full-time job, which means poetry probably wasn't how he made a living, and that makes his incredible mastery even more astonishing.
To put his skill into perspective, just think about his great contemporary, a poet named Yamabe no Akihito. For centuries, critics have basically ranked these two guys as the greatest poets of their age. A later, really influential critic named Kino Tsurayuki even said it was impossible to say who was better. So even among the giants of his time, Hitomaro was a true titan, setting a standard that people would look up to for 1,000 years.
And so, we come to the final piece of the puzzle. How did this man, this historical ghost with no official record, no paper trail, transform into an immortal legend?
Well, centuries after he died, during Japan's Heian period, Hitomaro was given a special title, Uta no Hijiri, which means the saint of poetry. Now, this wasn't just high praise. This was basically a form of canonization. It elevated him from being just a great poet to a semi-divine figure, the ultimate patron saint of the art form itself. He became the benchmark, the gold standard that all future poets would be measured against.
The exact moment of his official canonization can pretty much be traced to this very quote. It's from the preface to the Kokin Wakashu, a hugely influential imperial anthology from around 905 CE. The author, that same critic Kino Tsurayuki, explicitly names Hitomaro as the saint of poetry. And just look at that final phrase. His poems made the high and low become as one. That became his legacy, a poet with the power to unify the entire nation from the sovereign all the way down to the commoner, all through the emotional force of his words.
So, after following all the clues, we arrive at our final portrait. Kakinomoto no Hitomaro, the man, he's still a mystery. He's a ghost in the archives. We don't know for sure what his job was, what he looked like, anything like that. But his artistic identity, that is crystal clear, and it is immortal. He was two things at once: the grand, public voice that could turn an empress into a living goddess, and the intimate, private empath who could give perfect expression to the deepest kinds of human grief.
And all of this leaves us with one last, lingering question to think about. For a figure like Hitomaro, whose biographical details are totally lost to time, but whose art has shaped an entire culture for centuries, when an artist's work so completely outlives the facts of their life, which one ends up telling the truer story?